I can still recall pushing myself back from the kitchen chair, my heart beating so violently that it felt like it could explode, the plane tickets shining on my computer screen, illuminating a pale blue light on my face in the still kitchen, a round trip to San Diego. 2 passengers, I and my 8-year-old son, Liam Harris. One click of the mouse resonating in my mind like a proclamation. It's over. Megan. 3 years of life in the shadows come to an end today. 3 years ago. My husband, Andrew Harris, was presumed dead in a strange accident on a business trip. No body, only a hastily typed report and a death certificate presented to me with rehearsed sympathy. I still recall that day like an open wound I can't close. Standing in this very same kitchen, cradling Liam while a shaking coworker said, "He's gone." I'm so sorry. I fainted on the floor, embracing the sensation of the world caving in and devouring us whole. From that moment on, I lived as a specter. I had loved Andrew once so fiercely, I tolerated his constant work travel, his late-night calls home, and the increasing chill in his tone. I reassured myself he was merely busy, that he would be different. But instead, he vanished abruptly, forever. Or so I believed at the time. Since that day, I vowed to live for Liam, sold my wedding band to cover some of our mortgage, took a job at a local bank full-time and wouldn't let myself rest, filled every spare moment trying to fill the void I saw in my son's eyes. Liam didn't mention his dad too often, but each time he did, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. Today, when I purchased those tickets to San Diego, I wasn't purchasing a vacation. I was buying a promise to myself to move forward, to smile again, to teach my son that life isn't only about loss. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled. Liam ran in from the living room with a wide grin the moment he heard. We were going to the beach. He wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You're going to be happier there." Right. Mom? I didn't know how to answer. Maybe yes, maybe no. But I knew one thing for certain. This was the start of something new for us. There used to be times when my life was like something out of a chic magazine spread. Andrew Harris wasn't merely good-looking. He had that effortless sort of charm that caused people to angle in towards him when he talked. And that razor-sharp wit that made me giggle even on bad days. I met him at the age of 25, a junior bank loan officer, still trying to figure out who I was. He strode in with that confident walk, knowing he owned the place, asking mortgage package questions like he already had all the answers. By the conclusion of that meeting, I was enamored and he knew it. We were married a year later. Initially, it was the sort of marriage others envied: rocky weekend hikes, wine nights under the stars, spontaneous road trips just because we could. Andrew had recently moved into financial brokerage and quickly became one of the rising stars in his firm. I felt proud standing next to him at office parties, his arm draped over my shoulder like we were building something unshakable. And then Liam came along. My sweet boy. Our miracle. I thought Andrew would settle down, trade late-night work calls for bedtime stories, choose family dinners over client dinners. Instead, it was the other way around. He got even more busy, flying off to meet investors and sign deals in cities I'd never even heard of. There were months where Liam hardly ever saw his dad except for briefly. Andrew pecking him on the forehead at 6 a.m., and me pretending not to notice when the front door shut at midnight. I attempted to speak with him about it initially, gently, then desperately. "Andrew, you're missing his childhood," I said. One evening, standing in the kitchen with tears I vowed would not fall, he wrapped an arm around me, kissed my hair, and swore it was for a season only, that all his long hours were to create a safe future for us. I tried to believe him. God help me. I did believe him until the day he just didn't come home. At first, I thought it was just one of those trips he'd forgotten to tell me about. Then his phone went straight to voicemail. For 3 days, I told Liam, "Daddy's busy. Honey, he'll be home soon." Even as fear curled in my belly like a fist on the 4th day, the call came. An accident. A snowmobile through thin ice on an isolated river in Idaho. carried off by a current so powerful they said divers couldn't bring back a body. I remember clutching that phone, listening to the words, and feeling my knees collapse. My little boy looked up at me with those big brown eyes, confused as I sat in the kitchen floor, holding the phone to my chest. I thought of all the birthdays past, the unspoken dinners, the solo nights, and despised myself for still loving him then. They sent out a death certificate a week later, a neatly typed piece of paper, legally binding. Locking my life into a chapter I hadn't consented to end, I buried an empty urn because there was nothing to bury. No closure, just quiet. And in that quiet, I constructed walls around my heart so tall that even Liam had noticed. "Mommy, why don't you smile anymore?" he asked one evening. I smiled anyway, because what choice did I have? For 3 years, I lied to myself that I was healing, that I was strong, but grief clings like glue. You can scrub and scrape, but it clings to your soul. That's why this trip to San Diego wasn't just about beaches and sunshine, it was about breathing again, even if just for a week. I had no idea how quickly those walls I'd built were about to crack. 3 years had a way of changing everything and nothing at all. I learned to wake up without expecting Andrew's voice in the kitchen. I learned to pay bills, fix leaky faucets, and appear at each and every one of Liam's soccer games without anyone else sitting in the stands for us. I became that woman who smiled humbly when others expressed sympathy, who brushed aside worried inquiries from coworkers, who tried to talk herself into being okay, even when I wasn't. Denver grew quieter in the 3 years. Our friends gradually stopped phoning. Not out of cruelty, simply because life gets on. Mine felt stuck like winter refusing to thaw. I threw myself into work at the bank, established a routine with not much space for emotion, and held onto Liam like a rope. He became my everything, if I was too exhausted to leave bed. I reminded myself, he needs breakfast, he needs school, he needs you to be strong. Liam grew quickly, too quickly. 1 minute I was teaching him how to tie his shoes, and the next he was dictating which superhero films I absolutely had to watch. And more recently, the questions about his dad had resumed, whispered quiet ones at night when he thought I wouldn't hear underneath the voice. "Mom, do you think Daddy can see me? Or when I grow up, will I remember what he looked like?" I replied the best I could. But each response was like I was erasing Andrew Moore, filling him in with hazy recollections and half-lies about a man who spent so much time working but loved you deeply. The reality is, I hadn't grieved any of it. I'd shelved my grief like an old book I did not wish to read. But only so many times can you walk by that shelf before the weight begins to break it. One night after tucking Liam in, I was browsing vacation packages on the internet. I hadn't traveled in ages, not since prior to Andrew's passing. At first, it felt guilty. Like I was being disloyal to something holy, but then I saw Liam's shut bedroom door and thought, he deserves happy memories too. That's how I found myself with 2 San Diego tickets, 1 beachside hotel room, and a work week reserved on my calendar. It was reckless, like leaping into icy water, but also really liberating. This wasn't all about sun and coastline. It was about reminding myself that I could still live when I broke it to Liam. His eyes widened and his mouth dropped open like he'd been bestowed a superhero gift. "The beach? For real?" he yelled, bouncing on the couch. He hugged me so hard I could hardly breathe, whispering, "You're going to smile more there." "Right. Mom?" That simple question caught in my chest like a rock you can't swallow. I kissed his head and said, "I'll try. Honey, I'll really try." That night, I stood by the window, gazing out over the city lights of Denver, thinking about how changed my life had become. I used to fantasize about exotic getaways with Andrew, tapping champagne glasses on some European balcony. Now simply reserving a plane trip to California seemed like ascending Everest, but as I loaded Liam's go-to swim trunks and sunscreen, a thought struck me I hadn't had in years. Maybe, just perhaps, this is the beginning of something better. I didn't have any idea then how right and how wrong that thought would be. The morning of our flight. Liam was bouncing around the house like it was Christmas. He pulled his little rolling suitcase behind him, the wheels clattering on the hardwood as he yelled, "San Diego, here we come." His enthusiasm was infectious, for the first time in years. I felt that flutter of excitement I thought I'd buried with Andrew's death certificate. The airport was its usual chaos, people rushing by with coffee cups, security lines coiling forever, the monotonous buzz of exhausted passengers attempting to catch their flights. Liam squeezed my hand throughout, his little fingers wrapping around mine with a combination of wonder and apprehension. We boarded our flight, and as we located our seats, he pressed his face against the window and whispered, "We're really going. Mom, we're really doing this." The flight was crowded but peaceful. Passengers settled in, pulling out headsets, books, or neck pillows. I attempted to relax, telling myself this vacation was about moving on from the past, about making new memories. But then I saw Liam gazing down the aisle, his small brow creasing in confusion. "Mom," he whispered, pulling on my sleeve. "Is that Dad?" My heart froze. I craned my neck slowly, afraid of what I'd see. A man, perhaps 2 rows in front of me, sat at an angle in his seat, conversing with a young blonde woman next to him. He had a broad-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over most of his face, and a pair of dark sunglasses, something in the slant of his shoulders, the motion of his hands as he moved them. It was achingly familiar. I made a shaky laugh. "Sweetie." "No, you have to be mistaken." But then he moved ever so slightly, and my stomach froze up into ice. There it was, that little scar just below the jawline, almost unnoticeable unless you knew where to find it. A scar I had kissed 100 times in a previous life. Liam whispered, "Mom, I'm serious. That's Dad. I couldn't breathe. For 3 years, I had told myself Andrew was gone, that I had buried every scrap of hope, and yet here I stood on some random flight to San Diego, gazing at a man who was the spitting image of my dead husband. Alive and smiling with another woman." I clung to Liam's hand. "It's probably someone who looks like him. Honey, people can be similar." But my voice shook, giving away the lie. I turned away from the window, willing my pulse to slow, but every nerve in my body screamed to look again. As the flight took off, I kept stealing glances, memorizing every detail. The way he leaned in to listen to the woman, the casual way his fingers tapped on the armrest, exactly how Andrew used to when he was thinking. I told myself it wasn't possible. That grief was playing tricks on me. But deep down, a whisper echoed in my head. What if it actually is him? The rest of the flight. I was paralyzed, my mind racing between shock and rage and something much more deadly. Hope. As the wheels hit the ground and passengers began collecting baggage, I made a decision that shocked even myself. I remained seated, gripping Liam's backpack, waiting for the man to exit first so I wouldn't have to look at his face again, or perhaps, because I was too scared I would see it clearly. But Liam wasn't finished. He spun around to face me, eyes wide, and said, "Mom." He looked directly at me. He smiled, and like that, my whole world turned over. San Diego welcomed us with warm sun and the scent of salt in the air, a nice contrast to Denver's dry cold. Liam was still wired from the flight, talking about how the ocean appeared in the window, how large the waves must be, how he couldn't help but construct the tallest sand castle in history. I smiled, attempted to remain in the moment, but my mind lingered on that man on the plane. Coincidence. I said it over and over. People resemble one another all the time. But the scar, that stance. Even the placement of his hand on the seatback, it was too reminiscent. And Liam, children don't imagine things such as that, not with such absolute certainty. By the time we had arrived at the hotel, I'd talked myself into letting it go. This holiday was meant to be about mending, not reliving ghosts. We had an ocean view from the balcony, and when Liam saw it, he gasped like he'd been given a treasure chest. He spent the night shuttling between the window and the TV, chattering on about seashells and dolphins. For a few hours, I felt like myself again. That night, after Liam had fallen asleep, I walked out onto the balcony, breathing in the ocean air. It was still, quiet, until I heard raised voices from the balcony below. At first, muffled bickering like any couple splattered on vacation. But then I froze. That voice, that rhythm. "Do you ever give a damn about anything other than money?" A man barked down below, frustration seeping into every sentence. My stomach fell, my hands clenched around the railing so tight my knuckles went white. That voice, I would have known it anywhere. I didn't need to listen to each word. I could listen to the rhythm, the very way he stressed his syllables when he was angry. A woman, young, from the tone, shot back at him. "Do not try it with me. Andrew, I told you what I wanted from the very beginning. Andrew." My knees buckled and I had to catch myself on the balcony door. It couldn't be. It wasn't meant to be possible. I crouched down slightly, enough to look down without being noticeable. There he was. Same wide shoulders, same gesture he used when he spoke. In a t-shirt and shorts, the wide-brimmed hat and shades were nowhere to be seen, and there was no mistaking him now. Andrew Harris. My dead husband. Standing one floor below me, very much alive and yelling at some other woman. My first urge was to barge on down there. Demand answers. Scream all the questions that had lain buried for 3 years. But my feet wouldn't budge. Instead, I stood there trembling, hearing pieces of their argument. "You think taking me to some shit hotel in San Diego compensates for all this?" she shouted. "It's a 4-star hotel." "Chloe," he snapped. "Chloe?" That was what she was called, I guess. I stepped back, pressing a hand against my lips, my heart aching as if it could shatter all over again, not from losing him, but from discovering he was alive, smiling at another woman, living a life I wasn't even permitted to know existed, when I finally stepped back inside. Liam stirred in his sleep and mumbled, "Mom." I knelt beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. "Shh, it's okay. Sweetheart, go back to sleep." He sighed and rolled over, completely unaware that his whole world had just changed. Mine had too. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. One thought racing like wildfire through my head. He's alive. Andrew is alive. And I had no idea what to do with that fact. The following morning, I awoke praying it had all been some sinister nightmare. But one glance at the balcony below reminded me that it hadn't. Andrew Harris, my late husband, was alive, breathing and living a floor below me with a woman called Chloe. I went through the day on autopilot, smiling for Liam as we played on the beach. But my chest was constricted, like each breath was borrowed. I told myself I'd focus on Liam and let the rest go. But when night fell and Liam drifted to sleep, curiosity and anger got the better of me. I slipped on my wide sunglasses, tied my hair back, and walked down to the hotel bar. The place was quiet, lit with soft amber lamps and the hum of a small jazz trio in the corner. And there he was, sitting alone at the bar, a drink in hand, looking worn and aged, but unmistakably Andrew. He didn't notice me. He was too distracted staring at the glass as if it contained all the secrets he'd been pursuing. My legs carried me before I could think. I sat 2 seats over, trying to maintain my voice low and nonchalant. "Rough night." He glanced up, stunned, then flashed me a tired half-smile. You could say that. His voice. God. That voice washed over me like a wave. "Want to talk about it?" I asked, forcing my voice to be as if I were just chatting with a stranger. Andrew shrugged. "Girlfriend drama. You know the way it is." I forced a laugh. Even while my stomach roiled, girlfriend drama. This guy had faked his own death and abandoned his wife and child, only to be fighting over hotel quality with someone else now. "She doesn't understand me," he went on, stirring the amber liquid in his glass. "Thinks I'm some dull old bloke attempting to play young again. Perhaps she is correct." He looked at me then, eyes scanning as if he were attempting to recognize me. I waited with bated breath and gazed at my drink. "What do you want her to notice?" I asked softly. He laughed, a sour one, that I'm not merely some bloke with cash, that I've been to hell and back again. That I'm attempting to improve, but nobody ever gets to see the big picture. He stopped and shook his head. Forget it. You don't want to hear my sob story. I'm a good listener. I spoke softly. Inside my heart was racing. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. 3 years ago, lost everything. Thought I was finished, had to start all over again. Leave people behind. I didn't want to leave, but you can't explain that to everyone. Sometimes you just vanish. I held my glass so tightly I feared it would shatter. Vanish. That's what he referred to as leaving us. Vanishing. I needed to shout. To tell him who I was. To pull him upstairs to look at his son sleeping in blissful unawareness. But I didn't. I simply sat, nodding like a stranger as my world spun. Andrew set down his drink and stood, bestowing upon me a courteous nod. Thanks for hearing me out. You're more pleasant to speak with than most people I know. I had a strained smile. Any time. And then he left, standing there, gaping at the top of the bar, trembling with a combination of anger and something I hated to acknowledge. Relief. Relief because the voice, the face, the man, they existed. He existed. But now I had to confront a fearful question. What was I going to do about it? The next afternoon should have been ideal. The sun was warm, but not scorching. The wind brought that salty fragrance that always reminded me that life could begin anew, and Liam was constructing, in his words, the strongest sand castle in California. I reclined on a striped towel in the vicinity, observing him digging and sculpting towers with a sip now and then from a water bottle. For the first time in days, I nearly forgot about Andrew. Nearly. Then I heard someone screaming at the top of their lungs. I instinctively turned, scanning the thronged beach until I spotted her. Chloe. The girl on the balcony. She was kneeling over someone sprawled in the sand. My heart stopped. It was him. Andrew was lying on his side, white and unnaturally still, one arm awkwardly bent underneath him. Chloe was hysterical, calling his name, shaking his shoulder. But he didn't move. For a split second, I thought of remaining where I stood. After all, he wasn't my concern anymore. But then I saw Liam staring, wide-eyed, clutching his sand shovel like a lifeline. Mom, is that... I didn't let him finish. Stay here, sweetheart, I called, already running, when I reached Andrew. His breathing shallow, his pulse faint, but present. Years ago. I'd learned CPR in a work training. Muscle memory took over. I rolled him gently onto his back, tilting his head to clear his airway. He's breathing. I talked more to myself than to Chloe, who was still crying, probably heat stroke or dehydration. I shaded his face with my towel and barked, "Go find someone from the hotel or call 911. Chloe nodded and ran off. It was unreal. Kneeling there on the beach, clutching the wrist of the man who had pretended to die and broken my world, a part of me wanted to release him, to rise up and leave. But I didn't, because even after everything, there was still this instinct within me to save him. Andrew stirred, eyes opening, fluttering. He groaned, his voice low and dazed. Megan. I stood there. He had seen me. Yes, I whispered. It's me. His eyes widened all the way, confusion spreading across his face as he concentrated on me. You're actually here? Alive just like you, I said, my voice shaking with a harsh tone I hadn't intended. Chloe came back with a member of the hotel staff holding a first aid kit. He got down on the floor beside us, monitoring Andrew's vitals while I moved away. Cleaning my sandy hands on my shorts. My heart was still pounding and not from jogging. The staff member assisted Andrew into a sitting position, offering him water and directions to rest in the shade. Chloe loomed, glaring at me like I was some stranger trespassing, which in her reality I suppose I was. Andrew's eyes remained fixed on me. Megan, please. I got up, shaking sand from my legs, my face passive. Not here. Tonight. The hotel bar. He nodded, still shaken looking, not only from the collapse, but from watching. Me very much alive and standing directly in front of him after 3 years of thinking he'd wiped me clean out of his life. I strode over to Liam, who had left his castle and was looking at us with a scowl. "Mom, is that really Dad?" he breathed. I dropped down on one knee, sweeping him into a hug. "We'll get to talking about it, sweetheart. But for now, let's just go on back inside." As we made our way to the hotel, my head was spinning. Tonight, I would finally know the truth. And I wasn't certain which frightened me more, that he had a reason for what he did, or that he didn't. The hotel bar was not as crowded tonight as the previous night. Only a few guests sitting around drinking cocktails and looking at their phones. I went early, to take a moment to calm my nerves. My hands could not stop shaking, so I wrapped them around a glass of water and attempted to breathe. At precisely 10, Andrew entered. No hat, no sunglasses, no means of concealment. He appeared older, lines creasing around his eyes and mouth, a touch of gray in his hair, but still unmistakably Andrew Harris. My husband. My deceased husband. He came slowly, as if I might run or strike him across the face. Seriously, I hadn't discounted either. Megan. He spoke softly, nearly like a prayer. I didn't reply immediately. I just looked at him waiting. "Finally," I said. "You have 2 minutes to explain to me why I buried an empty urn and spent 3 years raising your son on my own." He flinched, rubbing his hands together like a man attempting to wash something off that wouldn't come off. "I didn't intend for it to be like that," he said. "I had to go underground." "Megan, I had no option. You had no option but to pretend to be dead. To make me inform a 5-year-old boy that his father would never come back." My voice trembled despite my attempt to remain strong. "Make me comprehend that, Andrew. Make me comprehend why I've mourned someone who was alive all along." He swallowed hard. Eyes darting away. I was in trouble. Wicked trouble. "You know that startup investment I was making? It wasn't a business arrangement. Megan, I took money from the wrong people. People who do not forgive errors. When the deal fell through, they threatened you and me. I stood there, not knowing whether I wanted to laugh or weep. So rather than approaching me, you faked an accident and took off. You made me believe that you were dead because it was easier than admitting the truth to me. It wasn't easier," he hastened to add. "It was the most difficult thing I have ever done. I believed if I remained, you and Liam would be killed. So I walked away. I severed connections, changed my name, paid back every penny I owed. I've spent the last 3 years trying to create a life where no one could hurt you or me again." My eyes were burning, tears ready to flow, but I was not going to let them. And Chloe, is she included in this safe new life, too? He winced, then nodded begrudgingly. "I got to know her afterwards. She knows nothing about my past." I leaned back, arms crossed. "You allowed me to mourn you for 3 years, Andrew. You allowed Liam to believe his dad was dead forever, and you were having cocktails by the sea with someone else. Do you even have any idea what that did to us?" He dipped his head, shame emanating from him like warmth. "I know that I don't deserve forgiveness. I needed to see you. I needed to see Liam. I needed to know if there was any possibility at all to fix it." The tears appeared then, but not for him, for me. For the years I spent fighting my way out of sorrow as he used a new name and a new girl as cover. "You do not get to choose when to return," I said softly. "You don't come in here and assume we can pick up where we left off." Andrew stretched out his hand, but I withdrew my hand. "Megan, let me be a father once more. Let me explain to Liam. I'm begging you." I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly. "Tomorrow, 11 a.m. at the hotel cafe. You can see him, but then, after that, we'll see where this takes us." And so I walked away, my legs shaking, but my spine straight. I finally had the truth, but it didn't feel like closure. It felt like the beginning of another storm I wasn't sure I could survive. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm, gazing at the ceiling, wondering if I'd done something stupid agreeing to this. Letting Andrew meet Liam felt like opening a door I'd welded closed 3 years ago. What if it hurt Liam more than it was helping? What if it reopened wounds we'd learned to live with at last? Liam, however, woke up delighted. He thought we were off to breakfast. Do they have pancakes? Mom, please tell them they have pancakes, he said, pulling on his sneakers. I gritted a smile. They have pancakes. Sweetheart, don't worry. By the time we got to the hotel cafe, Andrew was waiting there, hunched over a corner table, nervously drumming his fingers. When Liam spotted him, he came to a standstill. His face twisted up as if he was working a problem too large for him. Mom, he whispered. That's him. That's really him, isn't it? I nodded slowly. Yes. Honey, that's your dad. Liam didn't dash to him like in the movies. He crept along, eyes fixed on Andrew, and stood on the opposite side of the table, staring. Andrew's eyes shone as he dropped to his knees to greet him. Hi, buddy, he whispered, his voice shaking. It's me. It's Dad. Liam's lip quivered. But you were gone. Mom said you... He just stopped. Choking on the words, Andrew's face contorted. I know, and I'm so sorry. I made a huge mistake. I thought I was keeping you and your mom safe, but I hurt you instead. For a moment, neither of them budged. Then, slowly, Liam reached out and wrapped his little arms around Andrew's neck. Andrew clutched him like he'd never release him, his shoulders trembling. I averted my gaze, blinking hard, because whatever my feelings for Andrew were, Liam had just received a chunk of his heart back. They sat, and Andrew ordered orange juice and pancakes for Liam, coffee for himself. The small talk was stilted. Liam wanted to know where Andrew had been, what he'd been doing, and Andrew spoke vaguely but truthfully of work travel and resolving some large issues. I let him do it, fighting the instinct to fill it in or correct. At one point, Liam leaned in close and whispered, "Did you miss me?" Andrew swallowed hard, more than anything in this world. That was all it took. Liam smiled. Small at first, then wide, and began discussing school soccer and the sandcastle he'd constructed yesterday. Andrew listened as if each word were gold, nodding, laughing in the appropriate places, his eyes drinking in every look on our son's face. When breakfast concluded, Liam pulled on Andrew's hand. Can you join us at the beach today, please? Andrew turned to me, quietly seeking permission. I wavered, but then finally nodded. For a little bit, the three of us strolled down to the water, and for an hour, it even felt sort of normal. Andrew and Liam constructed sand castles side by side, just as I had hoped years ago they would. Laughing when the tide swept one of the towers away, I observed them. My heart pulled in two directions. Thankful Liam had this moment, but hurting from all the moments we'd lost. When it was time to go, Liam embraced Andrew once more and stated, "Can we see you tomorrow, too?" Andrew looked at me. "We'll see. Buddy, one step at a time." Walking back to the hotel, Liam's tone was chipper, eager. "Mom, perhaps you can come home with us. Perhaps we can be like before." I didn't reply immediately because I didn't know the response. The door I had welded shut was now ajar, and what emerged from it could alter everything for the better or worse. That evening, after Liam had drifted off to sleep, I remained on the balcony, gazing out to sea. Waves rolled in steady and serene, so different from the storm raging inside my chest. Watching Andrew with Liam had been therapeutic in a way I hadn't anticipated, but also teased out a raw pain I'd fought so hard to keep buried. Andrew rapped gently on the balcony door. I made room for him to enter, his eyes wary, as if he wasn't sure how close he was permitted to stand. "He's incredible," Andrew whispered. "You did so much with him, Megan." I folded my arms. I had no choice. You were missing. He nodded. Guilt carved deeply on his face. I know. And I'm sorry. I can't undo what I've done. But I want to be a part of his life now, even if you never forgive me. Please don't lock me out of him. I looked at him, scouring for any indication of the man I once loved. The man I married, not the one who flew away and made us mourn him for 3 years. You don't get to come back into our lives and expect us to pick up where we left off, I said sternly. You pretended you were dead. Andrew, you left me to tell our son why his dad was never coming back. You don't get to erase that because you feel guilty now. He hung his head down. I'm not asking you to take me back. I know I lost that right. But I am asking for a second chance to be his dad again. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go slow. I'll stay away from your boundaries. Just please, Megan, don't keep me out of his life. For a long, long moment, all I could hear was the sound of the waves. Part of me wanted to tell him to leave and never return, but I couldn't help but see the expression on Liam's face when he hugged his dad that morning. Or the way he laughed on the beach like he hadn't in years. You can be in his life, I said at last. But on my terms, you'll call before you come. No surprise drop-ins, no disappearing again, and if you ever lied to him again about anything, we're done for good. Relief broke over Andrew's face. Thank you, I promise. Megan, I won't mess this up again. I faced the ocean again, my voice firm now. Good. Because I'm not the same woman you walked away from. I created a life without you, and I'm proud of that. I don't require you. Andrew. Liam doesn't require you to be flawless. He just needs you to be truthful. Andrew nodded, blinking rapidly. You're tougher than I remember. I had to be. I spoke softly. You ensured that. He departed quietly after that, and I remained on the balcony, allowing the salty wind to dry the tears I hadn't even known had dropped. This wasn't the happily ever after reunion Liam could have dreamed, but it was truthful, and truth was something that I could work with, even if it was just me and Liam continuing with Andrew having a minor, closely monitored place in our existence. When I finally went to sleep, Liam shifted and groaned in his sleep. Mom. We're happy, right? I brushed the hair from his forehead and whispered, Yes. Sweetheart, we're happy and we're going to be okay. For the first time in 3 years, I believed it.